today, we'll be talking about Lewis Hamilton returning to P1. We'll be talking about the disqualifications that happened after the race. And we'll be talking about some of the reliability and equipment issues that hit. Hey everybody, welcome to Pit Stop with Don and James. I'm Don.
And I'm James.
All right, we've got a lot to talk about today. We are right on the heels of the Chinese Grand Prix. Before we get started with our topics of Formula One racing, we want to say a few words. There was some sad news in the world of F1 with the passing of Eddie Jordan. So, he was a big name, and we're gonna miss him. James, do you have something you want to say about Eddie Jordan?
Yeah, our condolences to the whole, Jordan family. I, of course, remember Eddie Jordan when he owned a team and had the likes of Ralph Schumacher and Giancarlo Fisichella, and never really had the success that he truly deserved, but he's always been a great figurehead, very outspoken, and always fought to make the sport better. So he will definitely be missed. Our thoughts are with his family at this time.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Eddie Jordan. I didn't know much about the man myself. I wasn't watching back in that day, but obviously, even nowadays, the Jordan name, Jordan Racing comes up frequently on F1 broadcasts, and I've been reading about him all weekend, and it sounds like he was a beloved figure down, in the paddock, and so, always sad to lose an iconic person in any sport, and Eddie Jordan was certainly that for Formula One. Moving on, we had an exciting weekend. It was definitely full of some surprises. We had a sprint weekend this time, and so our first sprint of the year, which always adds a little drama. I'm not personally sold so much on the sprints, although it is kind of fun to watch. I wanted to kind of talk about one thing really quick, and that was I don't know if you got this sense, but there was such a dramatic change from what happened in the sprint to what happened in the Grand Prix. I wonder if the quick turnaround time and the only having one practice session and the delays in shipping the equipment, I wonder if that had anything to do with sort of unexpected results in the sprint race. And so I don't know if you had any thoughts about that, James. That just kind of piqued my interest, and I thought, man, how could it have gone so differently in the race as opposed to the sprint? So,
obviously there was the big DHL mix-up that happened where cars were getting to China pretty late. It was sort of an interesting lineup, right? I mean, last weekend in Australia with the rain catching a lot of people out and really mixing up the grid. This weekend was a little more structured how I thought it would go. All the big teams were up front: Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, all kind of running up there at the front with a little surprise appearance from the Williams. That was always nice. Albon qualified 9th, and even Stroll made it into the top 10, which is more surprising than anything. But I think the biggest disappointment would be Liam Lawson. Just watching him mess up in the qualifying and starting 19th only because Hülkenberg started from the pits, it is so heartbreaking. Is the car just really that hard to drive? Is it? I assume it's all built around Max Verstappen, right? And even Albon said in an interview one time that it's very front heavy. I think the word he used was fronty, and you have to have sort of an aggressive driving style, which Max does have. But is that just something Lawson can't replicate? Because he really seems to be struggling in this car.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I actually had this thought recently about this disparity between Max in the Red Bull and whoever is in that second seat. It is it's got to have something to do with the way that they set this car up for Max, and it's hard for everybody else to drive. Now Liam's of course a rookie, but I feel like
That's a very
he's
loose
done
term.
well. True. He and to your point, he has been out there and driven before, and he's looking worse now than he did when he drove, you know, the Alpha Tauri or the V Carb or whatever it was called, and so yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. I think there's probably something to what you said there about the car being set up for Max and his style, and others are struggling to to deal with that. And Lawson is he just looks completely out of his element. You know, he doesn't seem like he's ready for that. And I've been concerned about that. I feel like there's been several drivers who've come to that second Red Bull seat, Albon being one. Um, uh, what Gasly, I think at one point was in that second seat and got bounced out of there. And Checo couldn't make it work. Although Checo was on, he was close. He had several wins and P2s, but then it was like he would just drop off halfway through the season. So I don't know, not sure what's going on there, but uh, Lawson did not look good. He was just a constant disappointment through the sprint, through the quali, through the race, and I feel a little bit bad for him. Just reading today, you know, they Horner got some questions about whether, uh, kind of to confirm or deny some rumors about him not being, you know, even driving for Suzuka, which is the next race. So, and he was cagey in his answers. He didn't straight up say Liam's going to be there. He said we got to look at the data. So that doesn't bode well for his future, I don't think.
Yeah, and it was sort of back to back, right? Because he qualified 19th for the sprint, but then he qualified dead last for the actual race. Now, I will say there were some sort of redeeming qualities to it, right? Like even though he started 19th for the sprint, he ended up finishing, I think it was 14th, and then for the actual race, you know, qualifying 20th. Now, keep in mind there were a few disqualifications, but he finished 12th. So how much better could he have been had he just started up at the more towards the middle?
Well, I'd like to think he'd be better than what he's been putting together, and maybe that's all it takes is some time, and he'll be able to get it done. But he's got to get that qualifying pace figured out because he's doing himself a disservice starting at the back. Even if he has an impressive recovery drive, it's gonna be, you know, ending up in the middle of the pack if he doesn't start at a better position. So I'll be looking for that. Now I will say that all weekend long the commentators had a lot to say about the track itself. Uh, so I
It
don't know
was
if that was
resurfaced,
affecting.
from what I understand.
Yep, they resurfaced the track. Everybody said it was real grippy, but it was punishing the tires. So tire degradation was a big deal, and you know I'm not sure if you know they had the right tire strategy for Liam. I'm trying to remember. Did he start on a hard where everybody else started on a medium?
Yeah, for the race he started on the hard and migrated over. Now he also did two stops as well, where the front half of the grid was only on a one stop strategy.
Yeah, well, let's keep our eye on Lawson. I'd like to see him get more time just because um, I don't know. I feel like it's somewhat unfair to these young rookie guys. It's like if they're not Max Verstappen, helmet is like get out. I don't necessarily like that. And he's just known for being completely stone cold, you know. So, um, but on in other topics, you know, we really got to jump in here and talk about Lewis in that sprint. I think that that's going to be on kind of top on everybody's mind. And uh, first of all, in sprint quali, he set a track record actually. So he
Oh,
was
is that
hooking it
right?
up. Yeah, he was hooking it up. I think that in the I think that in the qualifying, I think Oscar ended up immediately breaking that record and taking it. But yeah, he set a track record for Shanghai with his sprint qualifying lap, which was he just nailed it. So that was good. And then of course he was looking like old Lewis Hamilton in the sprint. He took the win, got the points, um, which
First
sadly,
ever sprint win for Lewis or a Ferrari.
nice, yeah. So that was cool. I thought that was great. I thought that the sprint was an interesting turnout. Let me go back to my results.
Yeah,
So we
Norris had
had
a bit of an awkward race in the sprint. He ended up finishing down in eighth.
yeah,
Well, he almost had Kimi Antonelli. They were kind of duking it out, but just could not get by him, which was a little surprising, if I'm honest.
yeah. Well, something was up with Lando in that sprint, and that was part of my notes. Is I was just like, he was on the radio, um, talking about how he was like 8 tenths slower than Oscar, uh, and I don't, he was saying he's going flat out and couldn't get any more out of the car. He seemed like he had tire degradation somehow. So this is kind of why I was thinking like the short prep period with only one practice session and maybe the delays getting the equipment there could have ended up being a factor. It was like they couldn't get the setup. They didn't have the time to figure out the setup just right because it was kind of night and day between what he had going in the sprint race and what happened in the actual race. So I was wondering, I'm curious, and guess maybe we'll never know if that lack of prep time kind of played a factor into why Lando was suddenly so slow.
Yeah, it was weird to see just kind of him at the back for the sprint race. But, Piastri still pulled out a P2 with Verstappen coming in third. So an overall great result for McLaren. But to your point, yeah, only having one practice before you go into sprint qualifying, I kind of like it because it makes it a little more tricky. Makes the sprint a little more unpredictable about what's going to happen. And I like the unpredictability of what's going to happen. I think it makes for a lot better racing than just, oh, yeah, Verstappen's going to win every single race. But, having low prep time raises the stakes a little bit for the upcoming sessions.
Yeah, the sprints are okay, and I think this is a good example of how the sprint works sort of to our entertainment advantage because, like I said, it was night and day. You go into the sprint thinking this is going to tell you something about the race, but it doesn't always. One of the big factors, of course, being that in a sprint they make them short enough that you don't have to pit. So that's just them going out there and almost doing it flat out until they come across the finish line, which is cool. You don't see you know the long game strategy, but it was actually kind of getting to the point, I think, in the sprint race where people's tires were taking a beating from the new surface, and I think everybody was on the mediums pretty much. So that was interesting, and I think that was about the life of those mediums, and I think this kind of goes back to what we talked about in maybe episode 1, where they changed the tire compounds, and those mediums are a little closer to softs now, and so I think it was, what was it? Was it 17 or 19 laps of the sprint
19
race?
laps, yeah.
19 laps. And yeah, the tires were starting to be worn out by that time. So
Yeah, they ran a 19 lap sprint, but everybody was pitting on like 12, 13, 14 in the actual race.
yep.
And so you can watch the sprint back and you can see some of those guys like, oh, like I just have no grip, my car won't turn.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're obviously feeling it, but when you're watching it, it's kind of hard to catch. There was one moment towards the end where Verstappen was saying he didn't have any grip, but I'm like sitting there watching, like it doesn't look like he still has tons of grip.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems like a common thing. it'll be like these complaints from Verstappen, and he doesn't seem to have anything to complain about. um, but I will say, so okay, I keep mentioning how there was like these drastic differences between the sprint and the race. The Ferraris look strong in the sprint. Lewis obviously takes P1. Sauber has been faster, I thought, but then in the race they kind of dropped back. The Racing Bulls, I mean, they looked good at that sprint distance, but then I don't know if it was strategy that caught them out in the race. Um, and then, of course, McLaren was much stronger in the race. Piastri took P2, right, in the sprint, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, took P2 in the sprint, and then took the win in the race. So Piastri seemed consistent, but Lando went from P8 to P2. So that was a pretty big jump there for him.
Yeah, he had a mega drive in the race because towards the last few laps, he had that brake issue, a brake pedal issue going on, which is not easy to navigate. I was listening to the American commentary where David Coulthard was talking about. He's like, even like a centimeter or a millimeter, you can feel the difference, and it makes all the difference to the driver because you're used to, you have that muscle memory of where you're supposed to be pressing it, and then all of a sudden your foot's all the way on the floor, and it catches you out. So you have to adapt. And I thought Lando did a really good job. He finished 9 seconds back off his teammate.
He was significantly further ahead until the last couple laps when he had to lift and coast to deal with the brake issue.
Yeah,
and then Russell was catching him, but it just Lando managed to keep a big enough gap that the brake issue didn't ruin his race, which was great because that would have really been bad.
Yeah, you of course being the McLaren fan.
That's right.
It was a great weekend for you, man.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I guess the only thing that could have gone really better would be if Lando had a little bit better performance in the sprint, but like he was reporting something was clearly up. Seems sort of fortunate that he didn't have an overall reliability issue all weekend because he couldn't get any more pace out of the car. According to him, he said he was completely flat out in the sprint. So he managed to score a point. That's better than nothing.
Yeah. Overall, a great weekend for a lot of teams. I think, Alonso having a second retirement is very unfortunate. This time it wasn't his fault, though, so I guess that's a positive. But I'd like to see him start finishing races and kind of show what he can do in this Aston Martin. But a great weekend for the Haas team, man. Ocon coming in 5th and Ollie Behrman coming in 8th. Double points for the Haas team. I didn't think I would see double points from Haas this year. This one definitely caught me out by surprise. Now, granted, there were 2 DQs in the top 10, but had there not been 2 DQs in the top 10, that still would have been double points for them.
Yeah, that's incredible. I didn't expect it. They looked so slow in Australia that I was like, okay, these guys are not going to be good. So they definitely blew my mind with their performance in China. And yeah, what did they get? P7 and P10, right? Yeah, P7 and P10. Great points haul for them.
Yeah, and to put that in perspective, Ocon started all the way down at 11th, and Behrman started all the way down in 17th. So mega drive from both of them this weekend. Their strategy really paid off.
Yeah. I was impressed, and I always like when they do well. It's just so rare. Kind of got to be looking for it.
Yeah, and Ollie Behrman, I think he was telling Liam Lawson adios as he passed him. That was so disrespectful.
He was saying ciao to everybody.
Ciao, that's what that was.
Yeah. Yeah, little young punk. He better watch out.
I know, huh, man? They're gonna come back and bite him on that one.
That's right. Yeah, so Alonso's retirement was a brake fire. Is that right?
Yeah, he was having some sort of braking issue and just pulled in. I think he only made it one one complete lap before he retired, or maybe even at the end of lap one. I don't even know if he completed a full lap.
If I'm remembering right, Gasly radioed in and he's like, Alonso has brake fire. Alonso has a brake fire before anybody else caught it. So he must have been right in the vicinity of Gasly, who, by the way, Alpine doesn't look good, but Gasly did. He gained 4 places in the first 3 laps of the race. I mean, that's pretty good. Maybe that's a good sign for Pierre.
I think that just shows his expertise with his time being uh, in F1. You know, kind of jumping up there at the front, knowing to be on the outside of turn one is the ideal place because it puts you on the inside for turn two. Very strategic from him.
Okay, so that brings up something interesting. So the very start of the race, okay, it was pretty clean. The very start of the race, the pole position is on the left hand side, which is the outside of turn one. In Shanghai, it's that huge sweeping. I don't know if you call it a hairpin or whatever that sweeps around and then goes back to the left for turn two. Okay, so this has been on my mind. So at the very beginning of the race, Oscar's starting on pole, and and who was P2? Was it Max?
For the starting grid, it was Russell P2
Russell.
with Norris behind him.
So in order to close the gap there, I like, I don't know if you see this, but Oscar makes a move to cut over and like close the door on George. Uh, so I wonder what you think about that. Sometimes at some of these tracks, turn one, I feel like maybe you want to be on the inside if you're starting from pole for turn one so that you have the shortest distance. But because what happens in this instance is Oscar has to make a move to like close the door before they get to turn one. So it almost seems like it's barely an advantage to be on pole. And so I've wondered sometimes, like, this is just a thought that has come to my mind, like, should they be more strategic about where they place pole as it relates to the first turn of the race? And then secondly, what if they gave the pole sitter the option of which side to start on? You know what I mean? Like, do they start on the inside or they start on the outside? Do you have any thoughts about that?
From what I understand, the F1 starting positions, at least for pole, which determines the rest of the field, the pole position is on the driving line, is where it's supposed to be. So typically, that'll be on the outside of the turn. I think it's really strategic how they do that because it gives the chance for P2 to come running up the inside, create a little drama. But turn one at China is very tricky. It is that long sweeping right hander, and you can watch it back. There are a few cars that didn't really handle it as best as they could. I think Leclerc would be an example of that, where he caught the inside of the curbs and ended up kind of skidding across into his own teammate and losing his front left wing plate. Very lucky Hamilton didn't get a puncture from that one, quite frankly. So I like where pole position is. I've got no issue with it. If they ever decide to change it, that'll be the way it is. But for now, the pole position is on the racing line.
There's been a handful of races that I can't think of them off the top of my head, but a handful of tracks where it seems like pole puts you at a disadvantage going into turn one. And that could be, maybe I'm thinking that because I've witnessed Max Verstappen stealing P1 through turn one too many times. But yeah, I've just kind of wondered about that. So good to hear your perspective on it. Maybe I'm just being silly.
Yeah, F1. Well, they put the pole position on the racing line. It's considered the grippier part of the track, so it gives them the best possible line into turn one. I don't know. Maybe that'll change sometime in the future, but for now, that's just where it sits.
I like the idea of the poles that are getting to choose. Maybe they would choose the you know the same spot every time. Maybe that's it's they would never choose to take the inside line just because it's a little bit more favorable for turn one. But I don't know. Well, it was just a thought I had. I'm always thinking of cockamamie ideas to change the sport. A couple other things, notes that I had for the race. Um, it seemed to me like in the race, Sauber like immediately fell back. Um, Bortoleto ended up in the gravel a little bit early on. Any thoughts about Sauber and how they're looking going forward?
Man, Sauber is a tough one, particularly because I like Nico Hulkenberg. I think he's a great driver. I think he has a lot of value in F1, and he's got the experience, not always the pedigree though, in terms of results for the cars that he's driven. He hasn't exactly always been in the fastest car, but I think he has that added value, and I think he's going to do a really good job at helping out his teammate Gabriel Bortoleto. Um, in terms of where they are, it's really tough to say because they haven't had what I would consider a good finish yet in terms of how they're starting and how they're racing. This weekend they did 2 pit stops instead of one. Now, if the car's not able to get them through one stop, then that's something that they need to adjust because they need to be able to be on par with the other teams. Um, and then, of course, in the rain, that's a chaos. You can't really make comparisons from rain to dry. So uh, it's really hard to say where and how they're going to do. I'd like to see them have a good finish and kind of show how their car is really doing. Um, but everything has to come together for that, right? You have to have your strategy on point. You have to have nothing go wrong with your car. You have to have good overtaking opportunities, not get past. So we'll see how it plays out. The season's still early. I think by race maybe 5, we'll kind of have a better grip of where everybody is sitting and how the season is going to start playing out. They're going to start bringing upgrades to the cars soon if they haven't already. So we'll see how things shake up for the remainder of the year. I know they're already working on their 2026 car, so maybe they'll just sit at the back. Maybe they'll beat the team at the back, but who knows? I like Gabriel Bortoleto. He's got a lot to show. Him, of course, being the F2 champion. So we'll see how it goes for him.
Yeah, I feel like they seemed like they were heading in the right direction or making some pretty significant improvements this year. Seemed like they have a faster car uh, than they have had. I'm, but we'll see. Like I'm kind of curious. They seemed to kind of regress at the race. I didn't necessarily think they looked bad in the sprint, but then I'm trying to remember where they finished in the sprint. No, they were pretty bad in the sprint as well. In fact, they ended up a little higher up, I think, because of the DQs in the race. But yeah, their weekend this time wasn't so good. But in round one, they were much better and looked a little bit stronger. And even in some of um the weekend for China, they seemed to me like they were a little bit faster than they were in previous years. So that was a good sign, but I just was a little bummed out that they couldn't put anything together for the full race. So
Yeah, well, they were the only 2 cars that got lapped, with the exception of Yuki Tsunoda. But of course, he had that wing failure, which made him have a 3rd pit stop. So you can't really take that into consideration. But they were the only 2 cars that were lapped during the whole race.
all right, so we got to talk about Tsunoda because I mean this guy is putting together like great runs, but then just he's getting disappointing final results, and that the wing thing his wing just broke in turbulent air from everything I could tell. Is that what you saw as well?
Yeah, exactly. It just broke under load from, irregular air on the wing, which is crazy. I can't remember the last time I've seen something like that happen. So, definitely, I hope it's just a one off for them, right? You don't want your wings breaking at every race.
Yeah, and I mean he was close up behind. I can't remember who he was behind. Do you remember who he was following when it snapped?
I think it was a Williams, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Signs, following Signs.
So he I think the team radio came on and said that his front wing broke, and Yuki goes, "It broke from what?" He got all mad, and
Which is
I
hard to
mean,
believe.
I know he's like, I didn't hit anything, nothing went. It just was turbulent air at the. I think Coulthard was saying at that frequency, right? So like the turbulent air was just like it was uh, just at the wrong frequency for the integrity of that front wing, and it popped, and then he was hosed. It wrecked his drive. They had to put in put a new front wing on, and that was it. And that was really too bad. And Hadjar has been driving well as well. Like he's uh, the Racing Bulls seem to have a strong car, but strategy and freak accidents are, are working against him right now.
Yeah, it was totally bizarre because he finished sixth in the sprint race, which was a fantastic result for Sonoda. I was really happy to see that. I've always liked Sonoda. I've always sang his praises, and he just gets better every year. And then for starting, he started in this top 10. Both Racing Bulls started in the top 10. So I think he was on par to have a decent result. I think he would have managed to sneak into the top 10, and it just didn't come together for him. It was really unfortunate.
Yeah, I'll be watching them because two races now where they've put together these good, um, they they're good drives, and then something messes them up. I mean, Hadjar, of course, unfortunately spun out in the Australian Grand Prix before the race even began. So that was unfortunate, but recovered well. Didn't seem to let it get to his head. I can't tell if their strategy is what's getting in. Obviously the front wing issue, uh, snake bit Sonoda's ultimate result. But it seemed to me like late in the race anyway they were sort of dropping back. So I don't know if their pit strategy is not serving them the best or
Yeah, it was kind of weird because Hadjar finished in 11th after the DQs, of course, but he started 7th. So he definitely lost a lot of grid um, during the race. I haven't been able to tell if it is the strategy or not. Um, but doing one stop at China, like you have to push your tires as far as they can go. So everybody's losing grip at the end of the tire life. And that really does make all the difference, especially if you're a rookie and you're not used to the tire degradation that F1 cars do suffer under. So I think that could have definitely played a part to it as well. But I mean, the people that were behind Hadjar at the start were Kimi Antonelli and his teammate, of course. And he had some big names behind him as well. Alex Albon was right there. So people with uh, way better pedigree than he has at the moment. But he'll get there. I think Hadjar is definitely one to look at as the season goes on. I think he's going to do great things in the F1.
I've been impressed with them so far, and I've been impressed with the Racing Bulls. So they're kind of a team that I've got my eye on. I especially because I feel Yuki got a little bit snubbed for Liam Lawson's seat. That seemed a little unfair in my opinion. And I think a lot of people share that same sentiment. So I'm kind of looking for Yuki. At this point though, it almost seems like I don't know how bad Yuki's going to want to sit in that Red Bull if that second car is not drivable. So the Racing Bull seems like it's maybe a better car.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I think he deserves. I said this in episode 1. He deserves the chance to be there, and if given the chance, I think he'll do really well. You Sonoda just seems to have that drive to do it. So who knows? But we keep mentioning these disqualifications. I think we have to talk about them directly. So both Ferraris were, of course, disqualified. In addition to Pierre Gasly and Charles Leclerc's cars were both underweight, which is, something that I would think they would take care of before the race. Weigh them out before they send them out. Um, I don't know if they weighed Charles Leclerc's car with or without that front end plate on it. That might have made all the difference on it. But then Lewis Hamilton's car was just running too low, excessive wear on the skid plate. Not something that you see happen too often in F1. Most cars are usually sitting at the proper ride height. They have all the engineers to double check them before they go out. So just weird anomalies for this race that ultimately boosted both Williams into the points. So I can't really complain.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. That's devastating for Ferrari, right? Luckily they got some points out of the sprint, but that's a huge setback to get both cars DQ'd on in a Grand Prix when it's supposed to be tight between Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes, all kind of vying for the top three. That is devastating for them. It ultimately a good day for Mercedes, who I think sits in second in the constructors right now. And yeah, anyway, I, I can't say enough about how devastating it is for Ferrari to miss out on all points in the race. That is going to be big for them. So they're going to have to figure that out. And after a fairly decent result, right? They're still not where people want them to be. I think they finished the race. What positions did they finish in? Fourth and fifth, something like that.
Yeah,
Fifth and sixth. Yeah,
they were up there.
So very 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 bad for them. They've got a couple weeks to regroup. Hopefully they do, because it's basically been disappointment in both races now. The bright spot being there that Lewis was able to pull out the win in the sprint, which after that everybody's thinking, oh, is Ferrari back? Is Lewis back? And then this happens. So this is kind of a seesaw already for them.
Yeah, and Leclerc and Hamilton swapped places kind of mid race, and Leclerc just took off from Hamilton, which I was not expecting. I expected Hamilton to kind of keep up with them and just be like, hey, we shouldn't have swapped spots. Like, let's swap them back. But within a couple laps, Leclerc was already like 3-4 seconds ahead of him, which was surprising to me.
Yeah, and you could tell Lewis was not happy about being asked to swap spots.
Yeah, he didn't take that kindly. He's not used to being second string or having
right.
an equal teammate.
Yeah, so that swap, Leclerc clearly was faster, maybe because he was a couple kgs underweight. Didn't know that could make that big of a difference. But the wing didn't seem to be much of an issue for his performance, which was interesting. That was a constant subject of discussion for the commentators.
If anything, I think it made him faster.
Yeah, it was like Coulthard seemed to think that maybe the way that the wing was riding in the in the wind was compensating for it not being, the end plate not being on there or something. I don't know. It was interesting. I was shocked. Usually these cars are so sensitive to everything that any kind of small damage is, it makes an impact, and you can tell they're not getting performance. But he didn't seem affected by the missing end plate at all until they weighed his car.
Yeah. And when you're starting to look at the points for the season, McLaren are emerging as the dominant team right now, at least on the constructor side of it, right? Because
Yeah.
they're 20 points up on Mercedes, and then another 20 points on top of Red Bull, who are only sitting at 36 points. But Williams and Ferrari are tied at the moment at 17. So they're putting Williams in fourth ahead of Ferrari, which is really nice. And Alpine are the only ones that haven't scored any points this season. So Alpine need to really step up their game. I think if they have a solid finish, I think Pierre is going to grab him some points. I don't know about Jack Doohan. He definitely got his elbows out this weekend, and I think there's more to come from him. I think if they give him the right car, I think he can definitely be a contender for, upper middle class, scoring those 1 and 2 points down at the bottom.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that Ferrari and Williams are tied. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I think, and then Haas is only 3 points behind. That's pretty. I mean, it's only been 2 races, so maybe I shouldn't be too reading too much into it. But it's definitely, even at this stage, I don't think anybody saw Haas being up there with 14 points. Only 3 points back of Ferrari. Everybody, I think maybe that might be the biggest shock of the year so far, is that Ferrari is down there so far. That everybody thought this would be their battle, right? And so I don't know, like the rain was unfortunate, didn't seem to help Ferrari in Australia, and then the DQs destroyed them this time. So yeah, hopefully they get their act together.
All right, Don. Well, I thank you for joining me on this beautiful morning. And next week, I think we're going to talk about our predictions for the upcoming Japanese Grand Prix, which is the first weekend in April. So thank you for
Yep.
joining me, and we'll see you next week.
Adios.
Thank you.